This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry, we're recording just for audio for purposes of minutes. This is really a continuation of our last meeting, so we're in the work session of working with the S2 development plan standards. We do have the presentations of the applicants should anybody want to be refreshed or reminded of anything in specific, and it does include that historic view shed map should you need to see that.
Okay, but we're going to jump right into figuring out what we want to finalize here for the standards.
Correct.
And I have, just so everyone knows, Mike did send me, and now I'm going to look for the paper. Mike did send planning department staff and me some comments on the uses, available use part, so we can go through and we can talk about it. His was mainly deleting possible uses, but we could talk that through because I'm not sure I agree, but we'll still share his thoughts. So let's dig in. Do you want me to kick us off? And you didn't, those are Mike's changes were not highlighted in this, right? So
correct, but we can help identify what they are should you want to. There's some uses that Mike would like to have struck.
Right.
And so we thought we could go through. We did, since our last meeting, go through and make some edits, and we left those in red line so you could tell the difference from what you may have seen.
Okay, great.
But I guess we should just start at the beginning, because I know with Parcel A, Mike had some, I think if you go back to Parcel A right at the beginning. If we can, Chair, if you can indulge me, can we go all the way up to the front? Because I think there's some language up here that's really important.
Sure.
Because I think this purpose and intent is very important, because this is truly the purpose and intent of the S2 standards. It's to set the rules and the understanding of how this parcel can be developed. The S2 plan development per code can take both uses and standards from either and or the C2 commercial district as well as the MF2 multifamily district. So it's important to understand that this isn't purely one code section or the other. And so it was important for this standard to really call out what we're doing and how we're doing it. So, and then it does also, the S2 does have some specific regulations around density and height that apply. So that's all kind of spelled, not kind of, that always spelled out in this document. So sorry, I just wanted to go back to that for a minute.
Yeah, and I think the last paragraph, is important because, again, this is just the global kind of macro
this is
framework for the district.
Correct. This is like a zoning code would be for any parcel. So it would have any of the potential or possibilities. It's not what actually will occur. And then to remember, the S2 zoning code requires everything that's built to come back to the Planning Commission for conditional use. So any specific building site needs to come back with that, like we typically see, the building, the landscaping, the setbacks, the height, that all gets reviewed by the Planning Commission and a conditional use issued for that particular site building prior to them being able to go to receive a building code or a building permit. So as a review, the standards in the map go back. Once this is finalized by Planning Commission and you have a recommendation, it goes back to City Council for them to review and approve or tweak should they want to. But then as the plan is developed, the Planning Commission manages the site through the conditional use permitting process for each individual site as it's being developed. Did I lose anyone?
Yep. Nope, we're good.
Okay.
So then just scrolling downward, I think the question that I just have as we get into the permitted uses for each parcel, and Karen, you and I just talked about this a little bit before the meeting, is, right now there are recommendations in here which we can play with for A1, A2, and A3. And I think the question is there any reason or does staff have a perspective on differentiating between A1, A2, A3, or should we consider the whole?
So because A1, A2, and A3 are closest to Mayfield Road, we felt like there could be greater possibilities of uses in them that would include not only a multifamily type use, but also some commercial type uses, which is why we're recommending that we could go through and look at A1, A2, and A3 together. However, you may feel like A3 is different and needs to be viewed separately. A3 is the site that has Kangesser Hall, sorry. I have to think about that word. I apologize. On it. And it is part of the synagogue. And so I realized that in our description, we forgot to write that conditional use language that's already been permitted for the synagogue. So that use should be placed on the Kangesser Hall description, and we can do that. And I'll show that. We can show that to you so you understand that more clearly. But then the other sites, we went through one by one with uses, but we can do this however the board feels most comfortable. We can start this way and then take a minute and look at the map. And if you feel like we need to take a second look at, A2 or A3 and strike something, we can do it that way also.
Yeah, I think A1 probably had the most permitted uses. So why don't we use that list as kind of a starting point? That sound okay, everyone? Yep.
And Madam Chair, we can either, as we go through this, Mike Gaynor did go through all of the uses and strike them. We can make note of that if you want, or if you would prefer doing it. However,
I'll
okay.
Actually, on this first page, there was a number of ones that strike. So he looked to strike 1 through 8, and I'm sorry, 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, and 11. And I don't know if any of that, so I'll just share with the commission, like, my perspective is that we're going to have every use come to us for a conditional use. So by striking uses now, we're kind of doing that in a vacuum, right? So like if one is coming to us and it's, I don't know, an apartment building or multifamily housing, we may want next door it might be okay to have a residential care facility, because that's maybe that's compatible. I'm just saying. But if we strike it out now, then they wouldn't even be able to consider that. And right. And I'm also, just one extra concern is I'm concerned, like, just in terms of development. Obviously development is not easy here, whether it's bringing in businesses or apartments or, that's not a simple process. And I am hesitant to limit what a developer might feel is possible on a site from the get-go, as opposed to allowing them to think creatively about these uses and then come to us one by one for a conditional use permit.
And just a reminder, once council approves this and whatever uses are in here, if something comes along and it's not in here, then we would have to reopen the development plan, and first planning commission would have to review and agree to that use, and then council would have to review that and approve it. So a development plan change would have to go back to council. The individual uses get reviewed by planning commission after council has agreed that this is a good plan.
And I guess I'm just looking at what Mike struck, which again, I have it in front of me, but it's 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, and 11. And none of those on this one so far seem so injurious or radical to strike them at the outset. But I'm open. If people disagree, I'm open to it. Yeah, Jessica.
Yeah, that was one of my comments on the draft, was if we had to include these uses up front from the get-go, or if it could be more of an appendix or something, added.
Just structure of the document.
Yeah, so that is not necessarily, because I agree, I don't really at this point, given we have just like general conceptual site options, and the uses aren't found, it just seems kind of an expenditure of time and effort that may not be of best use.
Well, I think just in terms of organizing the document, we can certainly put that last. I think that's a fair, but you're saying that it just makes sense to do all of A with all the uses here, unless staff has a strong feeling or we have a strong feeling against a particular one.
Yep.
Any objection? Yeah.
I like the flow of it. It was consistent with each of the parcels, and it helps somebody who doesn't admittedly have a planning background sort of follow along. So I liked all of the potential uses being included up front, and because it doesn't restrict us or restrict a potential developer. So that's my comment.
Right. So I think we're just talking about two different things. One is what uses we actually want to include. And then I think two, structurally for the plan where we want to stick that list. And you're suggesting in an appendix? Or
If so that it does get amended at a different point in time, it would not necessarily impact what is included in the standards. Like say one satellite dish receiving antenna is out, that, as Karen said, it had to be like reopened.
right. So just, you're saying to leave everything in.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, if I may,
Yeah.
what I was saying is I like it embedded in the narrative of the whole plan. It just made it easier for me to follow. That's all.
It would seem like, even though I wasn't here, that a lot of time went into including these standards in here. So I'm not sure why at this point in time we would drop them.
Okay.
As opposed to applying them as we review the specific plans that come in.
Let me just ask staff, is there anything upon like additional review for parcel A that you recommend that we do strike that was initially included?
I think if we go down, we took out a couple things. I think, sorry, I'm trying to see. If you could scroll further down to E. So as you can see, what this does is, because you're allowed to blend uses between both the multifamily and the commercial districts. And so by listing them, that's making it clear what they are actually allowed to do. If we didn't do this, there would be some question as to what code are they following. So that's why we listed it. So we did think, probably an animal clinic and veterinarian animal training was probably not something that would be needed. Same as a funeral home and mortuary, a drive-through facility, because it's not intended to be, it's supposed to be a campus-like setting, not something that you would be driving through. A hotel use would be rather intensive on this site, although there are boutique hotels, so you might want to think about that. And then there's parking lot as a principal use we didn't think was appropriate, or parking deck as a principal use. And those were the comments actually that Mike Gaynor also shared.
Right. Now, I think I also said about the parking garage.
Right.
I agree with parking lot as a principal use and parking deck and garage, that for
Right.
sure. We don't want that whole site to be.
They should be accessory, yeah.
Correct.
Um,
Correct. And then nursery and garden supply with accessory outdoor, and then a commercial greenhouse were also struck. And
Public service and maintenance facility, is that something like what's on Superior? Like that?
yeah, that would be
City.
more about, yeah, I would think so. Like I didn't feel like that was the intended purpose of this campus.
I guess I'm still struggling with if the developer is still working on concepts and what could work. Striking anything to me seems really arbitrary at this point.
I think in theory, I agree, but I definitely don't think we want any of those lots to be just a parking lot. So, I mean, for me, maybe that's the line I'm drawing, where we want like a use of it, but
Yeah.
we want a meaningful use, not. So that's where I think, I want to ask everyone to think about where, like, there's a red line for you. For me, I think 10 and 11 in this particular section, I would not want to see 1, 2, or 3 become just a parking lot or just a parking garage. But I don't necessarily have an issue with like the greenhouse or the again. And the hotel, actually, we could probably use a hotel this side of town. So I'm not sure, right? I mean,
And there are such things as boutique hotels.
yeah.
Sure.
Quite honestly.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Can we get a hotel in Severance? So that's what's outside of our control.
So we can put anything back in that you want.
I think, yeah, I mean, and could you imagine, like, what if there's a commercial use? I was thinking about the drive-through. If there's a commercial use and they want to have a drive-through, like the drive-through donut place or so, remember we had the drive-through donuts for a hot minute. So I don't know. I'm just, I
Drive-through
think,
bank.
oh, yeah, that's fair. Okay, so I guess 2 questions just to sum up for parcel A. One is, does anybody object to striking 10 and 11 being parking lot and parking deck or garage? Any objection there?
No.
Okay. Then the second question is, leaving everything else in, do we want to make all of these available for A1, 2, and 3 and avoid having any distinction between the 3 in the development plan itself?
I don't think, I mean, if everything's coming back to us, then I don't see the need to necessarily do that. The only other one I might strike is that public service.
Oh,
That might be the only other thing. If we have residences there may not be
anybody
the best
feel?
use.
Is it only A1 and A3 and then A2 that front on Mayfield Road?
Yes,
Okay, so A3 is really part of the upper site.
it's the Kangasser Hall. Right now, it's the
Right.
current Kangasser Hall.
But in terms of elevation, it's not at the Mayfield Road level. It's at the elevation of the rest.
Correct.
Okay, so it is different really than A1 and A2.
So I guess that's the question I'm posing.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we want to make a distinction for any of the parcels, or do we want to have them all have the same broad possible uses? And I can go either way.
I mean, again, I'm too new at this, but I personally think A3 should be more restricted than A1 and A2 because it's at the level of the rest of the site, the Kangasser, like
Mhm.
the old synagogue and some of the new low density housing that would be built, as opposed to on Mayfield Road, which is a major street and it's a lower elevation. So I can
also-
see the distinction.
And it's also closer to the naturey part of things
Yeah.
and the historical synagogue.
And if I may, there's other distinctions than in other, this section's only talking about uses. So in the further down, when you get into sections, you'll see that the height is much different for A3 than A1 or A2.
Right.
So I think we've decided, and we can check off our list, that aside from, let me just ask one clarifying question. Does anybody object to striking 19 public service and maintenance facilities?
My question on that, would that apply to, say, there is some partnership in the future with parks? Not saying there would be, but would that apply to having maintenance sheds or things like that?
I think there was a park. I think there was a park use. It says public and private parks and playgrounds is a use. So I think that would be whatever the park wants to put on it, we would allow / consider in their
That could be
conditional use.
accessory to the park.
Oh, yeah, and even says 12 is like,
Oh, parks,
We had
playgrounds,
that
and
back.
recreational. Yeah.
you can have an accessory outdoor storage with
Right.
that too. So I feel like those could be captured. The one question I have, and I don't know if at some point the developer is what could be missing from this list is the other part of this is if there's things in mind that already don't necessarily fall into this list that maybe should be added now too.
Well, it's a pretty long list. So.
It is. But it is.
So we are a little bit limited by the zoning code because we have to take uses that are permitted in either the MF2 district or in the C2 district.
No heavy industry.
All right. So, I'm sorry. What was that?
No,
Okay.
that was a joke.
I like those two. So let's say we've agreed that we're striking, I think it was 9 and 10 below, the 2 parking ones, as well as the public service and maintenance facilities. And those are the only 3 uses that we're striking from A1 and A2. The rest, A1 and A2 will have all of the remaining uses. Question I have to staff just on how we're laying this out. Do we have to, you see F, like how we have a list, but it's,
So
do we need to include that in the plan to designate where it came from or no?
the only reason why we did that was so that it was clear where these uses came from, that we're looking at the uses that were either permitted, conditionally permitted, or accessory uses from the various districts. It was to help everyone understand where those uses came from, since that's what the S2 code calls out that we can take. All of the uses do become conditionally permitted uses once it's in the S2 district, because you have to get that conditional use permit prior to building anything.
I guess I would just, but maybe for like public consumption, once we have the plan done, this can be how it is here, but we may want to just have a list without that designation available for developers. Because at that point, it doesn't matter, right? Because they're all permitted uses, conditional uses in this district.
And you'll see there's a little bit of overlap too, because what's permitted in the C2 district is sometimes also permitted in the MF2.
Okay, right. So that's what I'm saying, like
Consolidate
and clean it up, because I think there is the duplication there that gets confusing. And then I'm just looking now for A3, which is a really long list. So
Yeah. So if we could, while we're looking at A3, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to scroll all the way down to B, because that's something that we just discussed about that site being that it's Kangesser Hall, which is part of the synagogue site. And so you'll see that in part B, we have that actually it's the initial statement above that says that, that this is the historic site, and that it has a conditional use, that the primary use of the former synagogue is a visual and performing arts center. And this includes activities commonly associated with educational uses and places of worship. That language should also be tied to the A3 Kangesser Hall, because it's part of that same additional use.
I mean, it's literally connected as a building. So
Correct.
it'd be very difficult to.
And yeah, I mean, and there's discussion as to whether or not that building's going to stay or be removed, but it's functioning as one campus, and so that use would probably remain.
So are you then suggesting that we would just?
No, what I was suggesting is that language that starts with
the
primary use. Yeah, so we should just say the primary use of the former Kangesser Hall, I guess, under A3 is, to be a visual arts and performing center, and put that language as the preamble. And then the other uses could be allowed should they discover that there's no need for it to be the performing arts center, for example. We're trying to be flexible. Remember, these are potential uses, not actual uses.
Right. And I think, and to the points that were made, since A3 is so adjacent to the synagogue, we're looking at a smaller list of permitted uses with different characters, right? We wouldn't want a hotel.
I'm not sure that
to the synagogue, or, right? I mean,
ones.
Jessica, you're open to it.
Boutique.
A boutique hotel, yeah. A bed and breakfast. Do we allow those bed and breakfasts? Probably not yet. I don't think we do.
With kosher food.
With kosher food, please, yes. Okay, so just to clarify, so A3,
So
staff has selected certain uses. It's a much smaller list than for A1 and A2.
So this has the multifamily list, which was also with A1 and A2. I'm not certain that all of the commercial uses that we just said would be available on A1 was transferred over to this site, because we thought we were going to talk about it all as one. So we may need to go back to the original list and just make a note, staff make a note, keep for A3, get rid of for A3.
Okay, so that was my question. If we all go back together to look at A1, just in A3, the A and B MF2 district, so we have residential uses in an MF2 district. What does that correspond to in A1? I think that's D.
I think it's the same. If you could go all the way up,
It's A and B
so
there?
it's A and B.
Okay.
So see A, the following residential uses, a
Yes.
townhouse or multifamily
Yes.
dwelling.
Okay, so the question is, if anything in A1, C, D, E, F, and that's it, need to be put in A3. So that's the question I'm posing to all of you. If you look at A1, C, D, E, F, is there anything that we want to allow, including accessory uses? I mean, I frankly, looking at the accessory uses, aside from the private parking garage one, I don't see any objection to including those accessory uses in A3. I mean, you wouldn't want it just to be a whole garage next door to the synagogue, but I could see signs, home occupation. I mean, maybe that's I don't know, the dorm, some rooming for people that are working there, or home occupation. Maybe they're living in recreation and community room facilities. That seems very appropriate. Porches, I mean, I could see the outdoor landscaping and things like that. Any objection to including C2 through 8? No. All right, so we're gonna, Len, you need a minute? No.
I was thinking about no matter what it is, they have to go through the application.
Yep.
You need to get a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
And just because this list is in here doesn't obligate us in any way, does it?
No. So you're fine. But if you have a point of view like I do on parking and not wanting a parking lot, then this is the time to cut it out, because then this is where we have a say on what can't be there. So keep that in mind.
For accessory uses, parking, the C1, that could include garages. So if any of the residences need on-site parking, that would include that.
Meaning we have to leave it in?
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be accessory to the principal use. So
Oh,
if you had an apartment, for
It wouldn't be-
example,
but
and
we
they
took that.
needed garage parking, they could build the garage parking that's accessory to
I
that
see.
dwelling unit.
All right, so then we're leaving it, we're going to include C in its entirety for A3 so far. Okay, let's go to D. Would we want on the A3 site, or is there anything we don't want? Multifamily dwelling, live-work dwelling, offices, financial establishment without a drive-through, urgent care clinic. I mean, here's where I feel like, I don't know, an urgent care clinic next to a performing arts center seems strange. I don't know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just thinking through, if it is a campus, it could be like a urgent care for the,
Student health.
Yep.
Okay, I'm convinced. Retail establishments.
There could be an art shop.
Yeah, like a store in the JCC or something like that. Yeah, coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's I think that's 7 convenience, retail, and service establishments. Personal services. Restaurant. Okay. All right. An indoor commercial. Well, how about this? Indoor commercial entertainment facility. Maybe.
Entertainment is certainly consistent with.
Yeah.
Selling tickets to a
Of that property.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's why we're talking about it together. I'm fine. Industrial design, I'm not quite sure what that is, but I presume.
So industrial design is related to the arts field, but it's usually design work then for a purpose that you need, like Victor, and gosh, I've forgotten his last name. Yes, who's from Cleveland Heights, was an industrial designer, and his artwork is amazing. But the pieces he made were functional, or industrial pieces, or like I think he created a wonderful like tricycle or bicycle, or so it's work like that could be related to an art campus.
Okay. So I'm hearing consensus that we're going to allow all the uses in D for A3. So let's move on to E. These are more what we are permitting in A1 and A2. These are larger, multiple family dwelling, lodging house and boarding house, nursing home, dormitories, fraternities, sororities, financial establishment with a drive-through, vet office, funeral home, hotel, parking lot, parking deck. Let's take that out if we're good. Let's take those out for sure. Meeting room, satellite dish, school. I mean, I don't know. I'm open to thoughts. I feel like having an animal clinic next to the performing space still strikes me as strange. But if we're trying to, if everybody agrees we should be as expansive as possible, I'm not opposed if we want to leave everything in. Same with the funeral home, personally. Okay. Okay. All right. So we just want to transfer this over for the broadest possible uses.
No, leave it in.
Yeah. Okay. Except for the parking lot and the parking garage.
I mean, there are things that are not in here that we wouldn't want in here, like gas stations.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
Right.
so there's some obvious ones, and we don't see anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting. Like, is there anything?
Yeah.
Obviously, not
Used car lot.
right. No, we don't. We're having enough problems with our service stations as it is. We don't want to add to that. Okay. So that's all of E. We will you also put into A3. And then I think we're leaning towards having it all be the same, but okay. And then F is commercial accessory uses, which I think, like we said, we don't want to limit that per se because they're accessory uses anyway.
Right.
Okay, so we're moving so basically we have A1, A2, A3 being the same.
And just a reminder that the only distinction is that preamble about what the Arts Center for A3.
Okay, now let's A4, which I have to find in this, because that is the mikveh, correct?
Now, the mikveh is separate. It's already standing free and shown on the development plan. So the mikveh stays kind of where it is.
But is that site A4 where it is, or no? A4 is in addition to the mikveh. Oh, the boiler house site. Okay. But that different from the other sites, I mean, is only along the.
We could. I could.
Yeah.
Is the boiler house still functional and being used? No. So it's really just an empty building.
Yeah. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Vanna White.
Right.
Right.
Right. So if the boiler is no longer used, then it will be torn down.
Yes. In fact, I think we heard at a previous meeting that it's in very bad condition.
Great.
So.
Okay.
But we only have the same list as A3, with the original A3 list for this. So does staff have thoughts
So
on?
staff, because of the location of this site, staff felt like housing was the most appropriate use, and we were recommending only looking at the multifamily 2 uses for that site.
I mean, I think I'm okay with that just because of the smallness of the site and the fact that it is only bordering the Compton,
right?
The back of Compton. So I don't think we'd want businesses per se. Whereas with A2, I think it is, we can push that development to keep anything that might be injurious to one side. Whereas A4, it's very difficult to do that. I see some nods. I see thinking. Yeah, Jessica?
For A4,
Yeah.
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Len? Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to leave A4 as drafted in the original. Okay. B. B is the synagogue.
Right.
Right. So this is, I think we're leaving this as is.
Correct. So there is an arm of the synagogue that's classrooms, and so there's the possibility that might be appropriate to consider some housing, and so that's why there were some additional uses there listed that are permitted or conditionally permitted in the multifamily district.
And just getting ahead of us for a second, that's the same for both C's, C1 and C2. And this is, again, I think, because the character of the site in a residential, like really tucked into the residential behind houses. You know, we're not looking at really commercial uses. These are residential, conditionally permitted residential uses. So can we say that we're in agreement with the uses as drafted for B and C1 and C2?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We're done with that section. Moving right along. And what's next? Let me go to I will break the news to Mike unless somebody else wants to, that he did not succeed in his efforts. We'll talk to him when he's back. So maximum density, were there any comments on this from us or any changes from staff?
No, there was not.
Any second thoughts on this or, yeah?
I did have a question, and it was just about the meaning of there's just this difference between I thought there was I'm sorry, I lost my
That's fine.
train of thought, I guess.
You want us to come back?
We'll come back to it later.
Okay. So we'll just put a pin in number 3, but number 4, urban design and planning concepts. Was this, Jessica, where you had some comments? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of it is getting missed because of the it being spread over so many different commissions, with Landmarks Commission and ABR and planning, that particularly like the historic preservation piece in this, I felt was pretty absent.
Do you have, and I'm trying to go back to think about your email. Did you have language you wanted to add?
I think because other than just referring to the historic parcel and the one bullet, under sustainability for A, historic preservation and adaptive reuse, we don't reference that there will already be the Secretary of the Interior's efforts going on for the synagogue, and they'll already be doing this effort. They already have the view shed mapped out. This is part of these characteristics that are being preserved. So I think that's some of the things that I see missing is some of the specifics, that there's other standards already being applied.
Roman numeral 4A, doesn't it say what you just said, or not
That's
as well?
specific, yep.
Okay. At least that's where the subject is dealt with.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we add a sentence to A that says something along the lines of, well, it says here, the historic synagogue and view shed as defined by the U.S. National Park Service should be maintained as long as the synagogue building remains a viable structure. Why don't we just say as defined by the United States National Park Service and all other historic or landmark standards?
Because I do believe it is under the Landmarks Commission, correct? It's a local landmark, or is it not designated? So it is locally designated. So they do have design guidelines that they use.
So that could be mentioned, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm just saying in terms of, I guess I'm asking you if you want a separate bullet or if we can put it in this one as saying that the synagogue and the view shed as defined by National Park Service and all other landmark and historic standards should be maintained,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera. Is that
Pursuant-
okay?
Yeah, I'd have the word applicable
Yeah.
before the landmark and historic standards, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's good.
Hey, did staff get that? Okay.
Who could object?
On to the density. Well, let's finish this section. Let's. Do you want to add the word landmark in there? All applicable historic and landmark standards? Or is it the same? I'm relying on your expertise there.
It's the historic property for the National Park Service, and it's our local landmark, designated landmark for the city of Cleveland Heights.
How about an all applicable historic and local landmark standards? Let's do that. Okay. Okay. And you had 3 things on your list, I think. Was that anything else in this section?
I think this is also probably where the community coordination piece would typically fall into. I asked the question to staff regarding some of the efforts that have been made in the last few years by the developer, a lot of the community meetings and coordination with the former congregation on cultural appropriateness for the plan moving forward. So I was hoping that there'd be some commemoration in here as our urban design and planning concepts for community coordination and cultural appropriateness or something along that like.
Any particular language that sounds good to you?
And are you thinking about specifically outdoor spaces or buildings? Because we have, or both. I mean, because we
I think it's
differentiate here.
Yeah, it'd be general to that we, the purpose, the characteristics and benefit for the city. So it'd be general to both built and natural structure environment.
Okay, so say what you said before in terms of what the idea, like.
Because we're encouraging urban design with community coordination and culturally appropriate considerations.
So can we add an H or stick in after G, a new H? And the design, like the overall design of the site should take into account community and cultural considerations as appropriate?
Yep.
Considerations as appropriate. Okay, thank you. And I noticed, okay, so that's 2, right? Okay, and the third one is in this section or different?
I think in a different one.
Okay. So I think in the last work session we did last time, I had wanted an E, such as landscape, play, something. Like, remember I talked about like playgrounds, maybe landscape, playscape, and art features. In E.
Where's this outdoor spaces, that one?
Yes, yeah. We can always use more playthings. Even what they were doing by Meadowbrook, they were putting in not even like playthings, but like natural boulders and stuff like that. Even that should be.
The Van Aken district outside of the Mitchell's Ice Cream is a good example of those kind of playthings, just kind of boulders and hills and things like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, I don't remember what presentation we had, but at some point we had a presentation on a park. And they said that that's the more natural, they're getting away from, which we see at the Bird Park, the Peace Park. They're getting away from the plastic play structures and more into the natural creative things. Now, I had a question for staff here. The building design. How much could we say about that, knowing that design is ultimately the purview of ABR?
I'm not certain what it is that you might want to say.
I guess, design to complement the historic synagogue is one thing, but we could also say, aesthetically pleasing, or reflecting the character of the neighborhood or something like that. No, Director Zampt is shaking his head. Is that because it's ABR? Okay.
They would have their own standards that they would apply anyway, like the ones that you just said.
Right. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. We always like to see if we can extend our authority just a little bit. Yeah, Jessica.
That was one of the things I was toying with, was particularly for the architect, Mendelsohn, in his design, that it really, there was some conflicting kind of desires. Like today we want natural setting and incorporate native plantings, but that wasn't necessarily the intent of the historic design. And so I was struggling with that, and but I guess that is not my bear on this one.
Okay. All right, any other things on this one? And then we can double back to the density part. Anything else? Okay, so let's go back to the density. I think. you
Just
read-
have a simple question. Is there a discussion of maximum density of units in parcel B? I thought one of the key points was there will be no development, new buildings on parcel B.
Because there's the possibility that in the classroom wing, there would be some dwelling units. The classrooms may not always be classrooms. They might be redeveloped as housing.
Okay. All right, so let's go to building height. And I think we discussed this pretty extensively. I didn't see any comments on it, but last call for for anything on this? No? Okay. Our favorite topic, parking and loading. I did not see any, and Mike did not have any. I'm just thinking back. He didn't, it was just on the uses that he had sent feedback. So, okay, I don't want to miss anything. Any thoughts on this? We could just read it over for a second. We talked about the electric vehicles. Now, here's a question on F. This is the development plan in perpetuity, right? I mean, are we dating ourselves by putting in a dated parking study? I mean, how does that account for evolving issues?
Well, do you want to answer it?
I think we can add in here as may be updated from time to time, but you want to base it upon a study that was done and not some ambiguous study. So
No, but that makes sense because we may want to have we may require one as a conditional use permit at some point, and we may want to base it on that too. So, okay.
On F.
Can I ask, I'll just wait for you to. Okay, so one thing, and I did not think about this when I was reviewing this, in our in-between time, but the thing that always comes up when we have big developments is loading docks being too close to residences. And I am just wondering on G, if we should specifically, and I haven't thought this through, but I'm interested in staff and the other commissioners' ideas, if we should say that designated locations for delivery vehicles, and we can even say loading docks, or staff could help us figure out how to characterize that, should not be adjacent to neighboring residential uses, which would essentially require it to be on the Mayfield Road side, or away from, not even on the Mayfield Road side, but on the inside part of that, either on the Mayfield side or the inside part, just not backing up against Compton and not backing up against, Euclid Heights Boulevard. I mean, I just think that might solve a lot of problems down the road, because if you remember, Hebrew Academy had to re-architect their entire design to flip their building. And I think it would maybe be better for developers to start thinking about that initially, as opposed to coming up with their design and then having the public come in and say, we don't want the loading dock behind my house. And then we say, we'll turn your design around, and they have to go spend money to redesign their building. So I guess the question is, one, can we do that in here? And two, to the commissioners, do we want to do that? I think there could be value.
I'm not sure how that would be worded, but I agree with your sentiment.
Does staff have a suggestion on how we might word that? Or where? I mean, I was thinking we would put it in G, but I'm open if it needs to be a different letter or.
I have a suggestion on this. In our existing code, we already say something like this. Give me a second here. So this is actually for hotels. All delivery, refuse, HVAC, emergency power equipment areas, drop-off areas, and loading berths shall be located and oriented to minimize negative effect on adjacent properties and screened in accordance with section 1166. So
I like that.
something like that, and it could be specific to adjacent residential properties.
I think if well, I will just say my opinion is I like that exactly the way it's worded, because then it would be up to staff to guide them. I don't think, as I'm thinking it through, I don't think we'd want it only on Mayfield Road because that's frontage, right? And we may want that to look a certain way, but you could guide developers to say, listen, don't put it over there. We have this standard in our plan. Think about where this might be most appropriate. But at the same time, it's not outright prohibiting it. So if there's a way to do it tastefully, I suppose. Yeah.
As a thought, we're requiring that it's a campus and that all the buildings have all sides looking like a front of a building. So I think it'll be an exercise for the developer to do to try to figure out how to make this all work together. In my mind, I've been thinking, oh, it's one company, one developer putting all of this together, but there's no guarantee that it will continue that way through completion.
But this at least gives staff, I think, the lever to say,
yes,
we're concerned. We know residents are concerned about this, and we want to mitigate your cost and your time as you think through what you want to propose. Judy, do you have?
Just wondering, when the residents were concerned in prior developments, was that like a fixed loading dock where there was constant?
Yes.
Because nowadays we all know we live with delivery trucks all the time, every day, sometimes in the middle of the night. And I'm just wondering how you control the commercial delivery.
Well, that's G.
Mm-hmm.
And we did do that on the Noble Station, which now I don't remember what it's called now, but on the original Noble Station where that was an issue. And they did, I think, they did adjust the design to have deliveries be in a particular spot that would not be problematic. So yes, because Amazon can come 5 times a day. They will
find your
okay. All right. Anything else on parking and loading? Thank you for helping with that. Anything else on parking and loading? Okay. What comes next? Vehicular circulation. I did not see any comments on this. Any other issues? I think this is pretty standard. Okay, pedestrian circulation.
Here on this one, I've made a comment before, and I'll make it again. I'm not sure if I have it. If I have the word, I don't have the wording of it, but because there are no public streets through the site, there will be no public sidewalks. And I think it is dangerous to assume that people will just walk from one part of the site to another, or even from outside the site into the site by walking on the vehicular ways. You know, in other words, on the roads and driveways and things like that. And it seems like there should be something that is mandatory that says there shall be a pedestrian circulation system that connects the buildings and connects the site with adjacent streets.
So 2 things. I think one, staff is highlighting B and the language in there, but didn't we have a sidewalk? Commissioner Gainier we have a sidewalk requirement. Oh, that's the next.
So historically, people do walk on the streets, and historically, and I think that that's the intention, is that they'll still be able to do that. And so part of the vehicle circulation is calling that out and stating that, you know, if this is how you're going to use this for a pedestrian walkway, then you need to maintain and enforce that design element, which there are roads in the world that are called Warnorfs.
Yeah.
And that's what their intent is for all vehicles. And so you need to post their speed so that it's very slow, and people need to realize that I can come across a pedestrian or a bicyclist or a vehicle on this pathway. But you'll see then we also suggest that there should be access from the buildings to sidewalks or to the parking lots, so that there is that access, and that we have to follow, new development needs to follow our sidewalk code, which is that B under pedestrian circulation.
I do think, though, that there's enough activity and density on this site that there will be a lot of people walking between the hundreds of housing units that will be here and the former synagogue and this and that, and just to assume, well, they can kind of walk on the private driveways and this and that. I think there should be a more mandatory statement that there shall be a pedestrian circulation system to connect various parts of the site and also to connect the site to adjacent streets. I mean, I think that assuming it's just going to happen and people will walk in the roadway, and it's like, okay, that seems pretty dangerous for the level of activity on this site.
Do you think that looking at the pedestrian circulation text right here, do you think that C accomplishes that? And B and C. Because we do have a sidewalk requirement now.
But there are no streets. I mean, there are no public roads. So there's not a, there wouldn't be a public sidewalk because there's no public street.
Yeah, so that doesn't call out public street, it just says any street. So in our code, we don't specify that the sidewalk is for a public street. It just says along the street.
But if it is a private drive, is there any requirement that those have pedestrian walkways adjacent to them, like a public street would have a public sidewalk requirement?
The way we're reading the code is yes, we do believe that that's true.
Yeah.
And that's 116508?
Correct.
Yes, and the difference is what the private developer wants to allow, what the private owner wants to allow, because we know on Oakwood Drive, they specifically did not want, had we required a sidewalk as part of that,
right.
They do not want people walking on private drive, and because it's a private road, they're allowed to stipulate that. Here we're
correct. And so even though we're saying they have to have sidewalks, that doesn't mean it's a public sidewalk for people that anybody can, that I could decide to walk through on. It would be for that campus use. So whether or not it's public or private is something that the property owner gets to determine because it's a private development.
Right.
But we do say on
there.
Yes, it's still there. And
Right.
we say on D that the sense of our, planning department and commission is that we desire public access to the site. And I think that the developers.
There will be
know that.
hundreds
Yeah.
of housing units and also the synagogue property. There'll be a lot of need for people to walk from one part of the site to the other. And they need to have a safe place to walk. It's not enough to say it's a Woolner,
No, I think the sidewalk requirement, we can thank Mike for his forethought. Now we have a standing sidewalk requirement. So I think it sounds like we're okay there from a assessment perspective. Okay, landscaping and preservation of natural environment. Any thoughts on this? I did not see any comments.
The main ones, we're kind of looping back to the historic preservation piece, which we have heard that it's view shed, it's architecture, but we still have not had access to the National Register nomination or the local landmark to actually see what was designated. So that was one thing I was hoping to have had access to.
Are you saying that those designations might have landscaping requirements?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. Well, can't we just add something in here? And I have to look for the, like even in A, like the natural landscape campus atmosphere shall be maintained as a celebrated feature of this development plan and be consistent with any requirements of any historic and local landmark requirements. Just do it that way. But yeah, okay. Just tie it back to the as applicable at the end. Just so historic and local landmark requirements as applicable. Oh, and I think we use standards up above, so let's use standards here and be consistent. Sorry, you're getting my drafting self here. Dangerous. The other thing I had mentioned something about was G I don't know. I don't think that was added, but I had mentioned something at the last meeting about like berms and, really thinking about how to better insulate / differentiate, between single family zoned properties. So is there anything, and I guess I'm asking staff, is there any other words, like are we limiting to just landscaping, understory trees and shrubs? Are there other natural mechanisms by which you can provide a buffer along property lines? I don't know what a berm would be considered, or if we want to just add that in, because that was very attractive at some point in the Oakwood development.
So perhaps under F, where we see each development phase shall have a detailed landscape plan that may include plant materials, berms.
Well, no, I mean, I think you have it with G. I'm just saying you only mention
Oh, so you just want
landscaping, understory trees and shrubs. And there are other buffer. It's a limited, such as, maybe we should just say such as landscaping, so we don't limit what could be used to provide as a buffer. And I think you need a comma after shrubs, maybe. Oh, no. Hold on a second. Consistent with the conditions. I think we actually need to, such as landscaping, understory, and trees should, how about instead of R2, should be used to provide. I'm not sure that makes sense either, but give me a second. If you have a suggestion, I'm open to suggestions. Where drafting, group drafting is not always successful. How about just before such as, I'm just looking for a word that would encompass all of that. How about natural features? Natural features such as landscaping, understory trees, and shrubs should be used. Is that okay? Jessica, you?
Yeah, I think so. The key emphasis is that single family zone properties shall be buffered using natural or built landscape features.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
So Jessica was suggesting we flip the structure of the sentence.
Yeah, just that the emphasis, the single family zone properties shall be buffered with natural and built landscape features.
We'll let you play it. We don't have to play with it, but you get the idea. We don't want to have a exhaustive list. We just want to have a opening. Okay. Sorry, but it's giving you a little bit of homework before we can, but we all get the idea. Stormwater management, I didn't see anything on that. Lighting. The lighting plan should be submitted for review. Can we add on, I'm not sure if we talked about this last time, but can we add on the A, lighting plans are to address security and safety issues and consider, I want them also to consider what might be injurious to neighbors.
Right.
So whatever I'm thinking.
Is that already in like the reference here, the section 116507 and the other ones here? Is that already part of the code?
Right. So as you recall, our light code does have foot candles that have to be maintained at property lines shared with adjacent residential properties. So
To prevent glare onto adjacent property.
right, and you're not supposed to shine directly onto an adjacent property.
That's already in the code and referenced here.
Correct.
Okay.
So if it's
All right.
already in the
Okay.
code, it doesn't have to be
Yep.
repeated, but I wasn't aware that that's what that referred to.
Okay, as long as it's already there, you guys can use it when we. And okay, signage. Anything on there? I think that was non-controversial. Sustainability. I see that staff has redlined the section.
So we had initially started like rewriting this and realized that what we should be doing is just dumping in our sustainability guidelines from our zoning code. And so that's what it's in there. And so that preamble is actually the little the red up there is what the zoning code actually says before it lists out all of the sustainability guidelines.
You kept the guidelines that have been in here, but then you added a preface to it.
What we did is we incorporated the guidelines that are in the code as opposed, we were trying to rewrite them.
Okay.
And we realized that didn't make sense, that we should be using the language from the zoning code as opposed to drafting a new section that was saying about basically the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, and then phasing.
And this phasing is in the code, the S2 code, but we thought it was important to have it in the standards too, just as a reminder of what's required.
Yep. Now, do we have to put in landscaping and parking plan, since in anticipation of perhaps our universal parking requirements being?
Sure, we can add that.
I'm being very optimistic. I mean, probably want a parking plan, especially for this site anyway, so that makes sense.
Charging station.
Landscape, yes, it's landscaping.
Yes, I would electric charging stations. I agree. Okay. Great. Okay, so now we have, if I can find it amongst my papers. So I guess last call. Jessica, any other things you wanted to address, or any of the other commissioners, any thoughts, notes, changes?
Is in the vehicular or pedestrian and or parking section, do we have like alternative? Oh, I see.
Yeah, we do. There was an electric, like an EV.
And is there like specific designated parking for that?
No, we would do that with the conditional use permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good for me then.
Okay. All right. So yes. Yes, we do. Which I also forget sometimes. So let me just, where we're going next is we've put in our input. Now we're going to have some time for public comment. And then ultimately what we'd like to get to is, and after public comment, we can go back and change anything if we'd like to respond there. And then we have a resolution that we are going to vote on whether to adopt. And this recommends, we're not approving this, we're recommending the approval of this plan. We're recommending council approves this plan. And then it would go on the June 16th meeting. Okay. Okay. So with that,
We hope that maybe it would be able to get on sooner than that, but definitely on the 16th.
oh, right.
That a first reading could happen. Yeah, we kind of gave them the alert that we hope to have something, but so our hope is that they could have a first reading on the June 2nd.
I think, yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're going to open public comment. Is there anyone? We just need you to state your name and your address and that you've been sworn in.
Right. Adam May, Compton Road. Good evening. I moved here 6 years ago this week, actually. When I was looking for places around Cleveland, I was continually drawn back to Cleveland Heights for a variety of reasons. It's a beautifully diverse community with exceptional architecture, passionate residents, and distinctive residential neighborhoods. Kane Park, Cumberland, Grant Deming, Cedar Lee, etc. are all widely known places of interest. And there are other hidden gems like the Bradford Cinder Path, Milliken Woods, Canterbury Community Gardens, Woodview Hope Gardens, Caledonia Park, Denison Park. Countless unique places that together form this community that we all love. Park Synagogue and the streets that border it and make up this area are one of those places. Severance was once 125 acres of woodlands whose development made sense to a planning commission from a different era. But times change, property changes hands, motive change, promises get broken. I chose my home because I fell in love with my backyard. At night, I can see the constellations with no light pollution. At dusk, I can see the sunset above the dome of the synagogue from my rope swing. It's quiet when I have coffee with my dogs on my patio. It's truly peaceful and serene, and this eliminates that. The plan before you is chock full of hypotheticals, but the few tangibles that have been presented are frankly institutional like apartment buildings with surface parking lots and light poles directly behind my house. if we're being honest about what we're looking at here. They're not luxury townhomes. They're not single family homes. They're not architecturally significant. They're proposing apartment buildings, plain and simple. I know there's a bunch of uses that are possible, but that's not what we're talking about. There are currently 63 single family homes that border Park Synagogue on 3 quiet streets. This plan increases the number of people in our neighborhood by over 1,000%. That's a factor of 10. At the time when our city is plagued with absentee landlords, dilapidated houses, rundown apartment buildings, and vacant storefronts, is this really what we need? We have countless other developments either recently finished, under construction, or planned for the near future. What happens when these proposed uses age out, only to become the next eyesore? My neighbors and I will be staring at them from our gardens when your tenures on this commission are ended and these developers are long gone. I fully support the repurposing and revitalization of the synagogue. It's an important structure and should be preserved, but please do not recommend approval of this current development plan as shown. Thanks. Oh, and I have a general question, just one general question. What if a development like this that is multi-sided? What determines the side, rear, and front yard setbacks for each of the buildings in a campus setting? Just a general question.
Does staff want to address the question?
So you remember we have different parcels, so each parcel is going to be a little bit different, and there's multiple structures on any one site. So it does become a little bit more challenging as you have more than one building on the site. But for example, along Mayfield Road, that's pretty obvious. Mayfield Road is a primary structure. And so the building frontage would be what we would view as being the front of the building facing the private road. And so then behind it would be, so we would look at each as we do any building or house.
Right. But then just the minimum setbacks are dictated by the code, but we could increase those setbacks with a condition through the conditional use permit process.
Or you get to examine all of that based on the conditional use, because we'll have more precise measurements and understandings on each of the drawings to be able to take a look at that factor.
I can see where there would be some confusion, because normally there's a public street, and so that's the front yard, and then obviously the other side of the backyard and the side yards. Here, because most of these buildings will not front on public streets, the question is, how will they be subdivided? Where will the front yard and the rear yard and the side yards be, since there's no since they won't be fronting on public streets? And I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but it could be a little confusing. At least to me. Probably thought it through. It's not, but I haven't done that.
Well, I think, I guess my point is that regardless of what's determined as any of the front, back, side, we can create setbacks as we want. We can increase them from the minimum. So if it's the front is on the wrong side, we determine and we want to create more front, more greater distance, we can do that with a conditional use permit. I guess that was my point, that we can be very fact specific.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more complicated without, the typical public street. But yeah, I mean, there are ways to handle it. It's just, I agree that you have to make sure that you are including the proper buffering and setbacks from adjacent properties, in this case on Compton. And Euclid Heights.
And well, there's no buildings on that side, but yeah, the other street as well. Are there other public comments? Please.
I'm Eileen Rammerman from Rutherford Road, and I'm interested to hear a lot of the things you were talking about in the standards are kind of fascinating, and things like maybe a boutique hotel sounds very, very interesting. From the standpoint of a person who walks my dogs from the Forest Hill area over into this area by the synagogue, one of the things I love so much is the neighborhoods, and things are low profile. You've got your 2-story homes. What concerns me about what I'm seeing here, 72 feet and, 150 units. To me, we have so much in Cleveland Heights already that is not occupied, that is new. And I question, is the best use of this space? And again, I applaud the fact that, you're going to keep the historic component and honor the temple that was there. But I just feel like all of this dense apartment style living is just not what's best for the vibe of the neighborhood. So again, I think there's a lot of creative things happening, a lot of creative ideas, but when I see 7 stories and I see hundreds of units, it gives me grave concern that we really are going to lose what people come to this area of Cleveland Heights for. So thank you.
Thank you. And just thank you so much. No, you take a seat. But I wanted to clarify that you don't have to stand, that all of the standards, should we recommend the approval of the plan as we've discussed it tonight, these are, again, maximum possibilities, and each site will come to us. And at each point where they do come to the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit, public comment, will be, again, invited, and we'll take that into account. You sure? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Just for the minutes and the recording.
In your steps in.
Should have had you stay. I'm sorry.
I didn't think I'd have a question, but thank you for saying that. When you do have potentially multiple businesses coming in with how is that controlled so that you have the cohesiveness? Is that an architectural and review board? What a building looks like. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so the process is we will apply as the Planning Commission a conditional use permit, which we can put any sort of stamp, right? Setbacks, physical structure. If, we've done on other uses, number of people, hours for noise, if it's an event center or something. I'm not saying that's what's going in, but these are the types of limits we can put on a conditional use permit. Mm-hmm. Parking, same, that we'll be approving a parking plan. The landscape plan is likely from administratively approved, but the look of whatever the structure is, that is not us. That's the architectural board of review with architects who do that for a living. You would not want us assessing buildings we have our opinions, I'm sure, but that's not us. And then building, the Board of Zoning Appeals, they could, if a developer would like, or if a business would like, they could grant a variance to the zoning code. And that would also be, so we're creating the framework, the code within which they must operate. And then they could go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance from that code, but that would also be a public hearing that does require a certain level of establishing cause for that variance, and public comment is taken into account in terms of, I'll just give you an example. We have a 5-foot setback between the residential houses in Commissioner Horowitz and my neighborhood. If somebody wants to build out to 2-foot setback and their wall is going to be right outside my dining room window, I can come to they could apply for that variance, but I could come to that Board of Zoning Appeals hearing and say, excuse me, but that's going to be injurious to my property. And they take that into account in terms of whether or not to grant the variance. And most of the time, sometimes that happens even before the hearing. And now I think I could go on and on about how our boards and commissions work, but
I was just going to add one more fact about conditional use permits. Should the ownership of a building or the use change, it requires a new conditional use. So they would come back to the board again to make sure that they understood the conditions under which they were approved. And we get to review that information again and either add additional conditions or to just verify that what the conditions in place are adequate and working.
Gotcha. And one more question. So this could be, for instance, A1 phase could be built, and then A2 phase could be developed, and A3, then our Bs and what are you all looking at as the time frame that you perceive phases might begin?
So that is up to the applicant, which, we can certainly have them answer. But I will say that in terms of when we grant a conditional use permit, we've given anywhere from 1 year, but that was before COVID, but let's say 1 year to 4 years to complete construction to implement their plan. So there's a long runway if they need, because construction takes.
Thank you. I think I'm done. So don't let me back up.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
There have been some very serious concerns raised about the height of buildings, and I certainly understand that. From me looking at the site plan and looking at the site itself, the only two parcels where tall buildings are proposed here are the site along Mayfield Road, which is much lower in elevation than the rest of the site. So a 72-foot tall building on the parcel on Mayfield Road, the top of that building would not be any taller than a 35-foot building, which is the maximum height on the rest of the site. So
Correct.
everything
right.
other than the Mayfield Road frontage is restricted to 35 feet, which is the height of a single family house. So my point is that yes, I'd be very scared if I saw something and said, oh my goodness, they can build a 72-foot tall building next to my house, but that's not the case. Where the 72-foot height limit is a piece of property that is so much lower in elevation that the top of that building would be, in effect, no taller than the 35 foot tall houses on the rest of the site and on the adjacent streets.
Yeah.
So I think that concern about height is very understandable, but it is mitigated by the topography, significantly mitigated.
And we did discuss that last time when
Right.
we
Right.
dug into the height.
But I can understand why people have that concern, because
Yeah.
you see the number 72 feet. Wow, that's tall, and it is. But you have to look at the topography.
And I mean, I guess for us, but also for those that are here, when a development does come to us for a conditional use permit, it's now become standard. We've established that we're asking the applicant to provide views, lighting, shade, and all of that, so we can determine what the impact is on neighboring properties. And that wasn't always the case, but we have done that as a matter of course, at least for the last, 5 years or so, if not more. Okay, any other public comment? And were you sworn in? I'm sorry, were you sworn in at the beginning of the meeting? Okay, so we'll just have our assistant law director swear you in when you're up at the podium.
Do you swear or affirm to testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Hi, my name is Cindy, and I don't live in this neighborhood, but I live by the Ascent. Every night, there are glaring lights from the Ascent parking garage that come down Delaware and South Overlook. There are storefronts that have been empty since we moved into our house 5 years ago. So now you're talking about another development. You're talking about a parking garage. I guess I feel for the people that are going to be living near this, because I know what we experienced living on Delaware. I know there were a lot of meetings about the Ascent before it was built. There were probably a lot of promises made about light pollution, and none of that has been fixed. And as I said, there's still empty. Urgent care has moved in, but that's it. So my question is are these folks in these neighborhoods that have just spoke going to have the same issues we're having on Delaware and South Overlook, where we have beaming lights all night? Nothing has been done to stop that. And I'm just using the Ascent as an example of something that has been approved that wasn't approved by the people living right in that neighborhood, right on that street, that would experience the ramifications of that development. Ascent is not full. Parking lights shine all night long. Whoever developed it has done nothing to screen those lights. And when you get up on North Park, it's a downhill, you can see the Ascent from the top of North Park and Delaware and South Overlook. So, as I said, I don't live in this neighborhood. It won't affect me, but I feel bad for the people it will affect, because when you're talking about an apartment building and parking garages and retail, they're going to have the same issue there that we have with the Ascent. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, we're not going to allow parking garages on this site. So we took that. But is staff going to say that they can look into the lighting issue?
Well,
Because they have a conditional use permit also, right? The Ascent?
I'll have to double check that. But I was going to say a lot of what we heard for approvals came through the Architectural Board of Review, not through the Planning Commission. So there's a slightly different process, but we absolutely can take a look and talk to folks about, what's going on.
Yeah, I think from last night's here, just a slight commentary here from last night's hearing and from your comment tonight, we should think about how to better inform residents that they can actually come to the city, because that is the purpose of these conditional use permits, to be able to understand where we can go back to those applicants and tell them
And
they need to-
there's a great tool that is our Mayor's Action Center. So no matter what your concern is, if you contact the Mayor's Action Center, Todd is wonderful about hearing your concerns and then getting that information to the correct department in person or multiple departments in persons. So one call will get to multiple people to address a question or a concern. So anytime you have any concern or question, the Mayor's Action Center is the best place to start, because he's going to take that information and then get it to the right department or the right staff person to find a solution or answer the question.
That is true. I'm just wondering if at some point we should consider putting something in the city newsletter or on social media. You know, I just feel like there is not enough understanding of what we do, how the conditional use permits work, how neighbors can come to us, not us, until you think that it needs to come to us at the commission, but come to staff to assess whether it really is injurious to neighbors and how to remedy that. Because I think we've had like shielding of dumpsters and lighting and also noise complaints. I mean, safety usually gets to you because that comes through the police department, but these other more, I would say, minor, but still bothersome issues, not everyone knows to call planning or call the Mayor's Action Center.
And that's, to be honest, I've found that oftentimes somebody isn't aware that there's an issue. So the neighbor hasn't actually addressed it with the person who's causing the issue.
Because that's awkward and uncomfortable.
But no, and which is absolutely fine. But by getting that information to the Mayor's Action Center, sometimes all it requires is the staff person to call that person and say, we need to work with you on your lighting. We need to work with you on the noise you're creating after a certain hour. So sometimes it really is somebody who's not intentionally being a bad neighbor. They just aren't understanding what their impact is. And so I think that's an important place to start. But then, of course, we can bring them back to the Planning Commission should we not be able to resolve an issue if it's a conditionally permitted use.
Okay, you have what, public comment? Sure, but have you been sworn in? Okay, so just join us at the podium and we'll put Lee to work again, so.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, we just need your name and your address.
My name's Louis Mandy. I live on Delaware Drive. Several of us are here because we're dealing with this problem. And you make it sound so easy that the mayor's, what was that?
Well, the Mayor's Action Center.
We in our neighborhood, right across from the Ascent, were just recently ambushed by a new development that's trying to go in on a green space between Delaware and South Overlook. There was no indication that this was happening. How do you know a project is going forward when the developer has been working on it for 9 months and we find out there's going to be a vote to move forward to a purchase agreement in the last city council meeting? And we've gotten organized, and I'm listening to this gentleman speaking, and we're getting more organized, but we're really just trying to catch up. And this is the Planning Commission. If a person doesn't have a purchase agreement, can they just go and start digging boreholes on city property without any authorization?
Well, that question would be outside our purview.
Whose purview is it?
Right. So I hear the struggle. I've been watching the council meetings from home, so I've been hearing what's happening. But just again, to distinguish between the commissions and things, we only consider development once that has been, there has been some sort of agreement with the city. There's not always a signed development agreement, but at the point at which there's been enough conversation with the city administration.
With the developer.
With the developer.
And the city and nobody in the neighborhood.
And we would not know that either. And that would be the
You have a lot of
administration.
knowledge.
And that would be the
You have a lot of
administration.
knowledge. Tell us what to do. I mean, we are simply trying to, I just want a level playing field. You understand?
Right. And I completely understand. And I don't want to pass the buck, but occasionally I have to, where this is a question really for council and the mayor, because they
Okay.
are the ones.
Good idea. Good idea.
But I would encourage reaching out to Council President Tony Kuda and asking for them to provide perhaps more visibility into what that process is. I can only attest for us that we only know what's happening when there needs to be a conditional use permit
Well,
granted. So that's at the point where it flips to us, and
But,
then we can
you know,
address it.
this is a great town. I've lived here 6 years. I moved here from Philly. And I just don't, I would rather not feel that you guys are adversaries. We want to work with the city. We would like to make proposals on what else we can do with it. But we keep running into, it's like whack-a-mole. So we're here tonight. You're the planning commission, and no, it's not the right place again.
Yeah,
So-
we like when we are the right place, because we feel like we do good work. And,
No,
we
and
can-
I heard that tonight. I mean,
but unfortunately on this one, nobody's giving us the power to bring in developers or, have those conversations. And that's probably fair, because I'll just give you one more example. And then we'll probably have to see if there's other public comment. But on the Noble Station, there was a Noble Station development, which I don't believe they had a development agreement, but it proceeded to the point at which they needed a conditional use permit. It came to us, and we as the planning commission said, this is not acceptable. We don't like your design. We don't like what you're doing. We don't like how you're figuring the frontage. We don't like your plan for the lots that they were trying to adjoin and not use or use. And we said, go back to the starting point and come back with something new. And they did. And they used a different architect, maybe the different developer, and they came back with a different plan and ultimately was approved. So that's the lever that we get to pull, is that if it gets to us and we don't like what it is, we've had two big examples, one being the Noble Station, which again, I'm not sure what it's called now. I'm doing a disservice, and also the Oakwood property, where based on neighbor input, the Hebrew Academy actually flipped the entire design of the development to front an entire different way to accommodate the neighbors there. So we do have really good examples of what we can do here. Unfortunately, we have to wait for it to get to us before we can do that.
If I can just add one comment too. A developer can be working on a project for months before submitting anything to the city. When it becomes something that the city shares with neighbors is when something is submitted to the city. So for a developer to be working on plans as a developer, we don't, at the city or the commission, necessarily know that. It's only when that developer submits something to the city and says, we now have a plan we'd like to show you. And that's when the public process starts and people find out about it. But there can be months and months and months of a developer working on his or her own before anyone sees it, because it's private at that point.
right. But once they file something,
Yes.
I mean, the developer in this case filed 110 pages of PDF stuff
Mhm.
that, we finally got to look at. But anyway, I don't want to take up your time.
No,
I just thought
But that's a good point you
you might
make.
be able to,
We never get people coming for, just to chat with us. So we're happy to have everyone. Nobody's really interested in zoning till, something happens. Okay. Any other public comment on this?
You could have been the right place.
Right.
Yeah, but we're not, right?
Are you looking for public comment on this part?
Yeah.
I think for the other business.
Oh, that's okay. So yes, just hold. We're gonna. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to say I've been on both sides of this coin before, and I've been where they're sitting and it's not comfortable, and I've been where I'm sitting, and it does feel like in Cleveland Heights, more than other places I've been, passing the buck is the wrong term, but it does feel like each group does their best because yes, but this is high level, and then we're going to pass this off, and there's plenty of opportunity for the other people to be the fail safe. Nobody wants to be the fail safe, so it just keeps kicking the can down the street. Momentum gets had, and finally it's in front of the mayor and council, and they go, yeah, maybe, well, God, they've already all approved this, so I don't want to say no, so yeah, it's approved. I wish more of these groups would. I don't know how to do that, but I wish there was more achieved at these versus high level approval and passing it on to another organization. It's been challenging for me as an architect to go through that process. And I'm sure it's challenging for them, and it's challenging as a community member to, like I said, know when to go. This is the group that's going to be able to hear me out. Oh no, you're at the wrong group. Come on June 16th at this time, and they'll tell you to come this next time. It's like, and I'm guessing, like all things in this town, it's a top-down problem for sure. 100%. Where's the camera? 100% top-down.
I've been asking for them to record our meetings for years, and
Okay.
nobody will record them.
Well, if he's still here, it's a top-down problem. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you. I just wish we could figure this out. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure. And just name, did you get sworn in? Okay.
So
Off duty for a minute. Yeah.
my name is Naomi Sable. I live in Oberlin, but I'm the developer of this property. I just wanted to sort of echo that this process has been really the opposite of what you laid out. We started with a 2-year-long master plan funded not by our company, but rather by local philanthropists and the Cleveland Foundation. So it was very much focused on the public good and the value that could happen from the redevelopment of what I think is probably the most significant building in Cleveland, but I might be biased. The areas, just to echo what Bob said, you know, the areas around the neighborhoods, for the most part, other than the Mayfield Road, are limited to 35 feet. So I completely understand the problems that you're facing with the Ascent. That might be an issue that we talk about when we talk about the Mayfield Road expanse, but we're not there. We're 35 feet, which is the size of a single family home. And, you know, that's where we're starting. So it's a little bit of a potential problem that we could encounter when we start talking about Mayfield. But I think for what we're talking about with the height regulations in the C1s and the A4 and the A3, we're really trying to be very sympathetic to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the Park Synagogue Development Plan and Standards? Okay. So with that, there is a resolution. I think it's at and now I realize it may be at everybody's seat. This essentially, it has a lot of whereases, and the operative provisions are that we're recommending that the City Council consider approval of the Park Synagogue Development Plan and Standards as we've amended it today. And we've left that one little part on buffering residential houses, whatever wording you come up with, but everything else is as amended. And I guess I'll ask if we have a motion to motion for this resolution. Len? Yeah.
Move approval of ordinance 245-2024, which recommends that City Council consider approval of the Park Synagogue Development Plan and Standards.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any discussion?
Clarification, if the graphics will be included as presented with the view sheds and parcel.
Well, I don't know, and now we're in a motion, so we can't, sorry, we're going to be strict about that at least, but we can request after if we pass this, we can request that everything be included and pass. Would that be your preference?
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Nope. That passes 6-0, and absent is 1. So we now have the development plan and standards recommended, not approved, recommended to council for approval I just want to comment. We will hope and expect that the residents will come, as this development continues. We'll continue to have dialogue on it. We're tough sometimes, but we also really do appreciate the input because we don't necessarily live there. We live in other parts of the city, but we don't necessarily live there. So this will continue to be a process, but at least we have the framework within which could be workable. And I am very glad to say that there will be no parking lots and parking garages on this site. So I feel like we've made a step forward, at least in that respect. And we can use this again as a model for a future, site development as well. Okay, so thank you. We're going to move to old business. Did you have a comment on old business or new business, sir? New business. Okay. Old business. I just want to ask the planning staff, thank you very much. Do we know, do we have any sense of thoughts from the public hearing yesterday on the houses of worship? Or I know there's a lot going on.
For those that didn't see it or attend, it was actually a really good conversation, people from different sides. But I think that the people who had concerns by the end of the hearing expressed that they were more comfortable, not completely comfortable, but more comfortable. They could hear why there was this purpose and intent. But there were some things that popped up that we're looking into. There was one comment about how the sort of accessory uses in community places of worship didn't make sense. So we're going to take another look at that. And then there was a talk about a traffic study, and similar to what we thought about with the parking study, it makes sense to require that when requested by the Planning Commission for all conditional use permits, because it's not just places of worship.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to recommend those changes. So long story short is that it would be an as amended exhibit.
And okay, that is helpful. The one thing that I happened to mention to Karen before the meeting, but I'll mention, here, is that I thought there was significant conversation yesterday around saturation, right? Potential saturation, which I don't think is necessarily a highly urgent concern. Like, I think that was based, let me say this, I think it was based on the misperception that any family could just say their house was a house of worship and therefore be tax exempt, which isn't the case, but they thought that might lead to, everybody raising their hand and say, hey, I'm converting my house to, it's now under a Congregation Bethel or something like that, and therefore, but we did clarify at the hearing that if it is a residential use, it is not a house of worship. If it is a house of worship, it cannot be a residential use. So people are going to have to either give up their homes for a house of worship, or they can live there and pay their taxes. It can't be both. But that being said, I did think there was some validity to the concern of, are we going to allow one on every block? Are we going to allow two on a block? And I know that we have we propose different code changes for middle of the block versus corner lot. But I guess I'm asking staff, as you relook at this just one more time, if there's some sort of again, lever may not be the right word, but some sort of language that could be inserted that the Planning Commission has to consider, not to actually create a standard. I think that might be contrary to RLUIPA, where we can't limit it, but that the Planning Commission has to consider the surrounding houses of worship, like existing houses of worship, residential houses of worship or something like that, specifically for the residential piece. So
any concentration of these houses of
right, like we can't. My understanding of RLUIPA, which again, I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, but my understanding is we can't have any sort of condition on a house of worship that we wouldn't otherwise have, and we don't limit the amount of daycares we have with conditional use permits. So we can't limit it, but I think that it is a consideration that we should have. And I just think there might be value. Like, we know that we're going to consider that, and we said it at the meeting yesterday, but maybe that alleviates concerns if we have, and again, I don't, because that's usually in the conditional the conditions, right? Like the list of conditions that we consider, but I leave it up to you all to think about how we might put that in there, not again as a requirement, but as something that we consider as part of the overall. And if it has to be in another part of the code, or, you know, something in the conditional uses condition, you know what I mean? That long list that maybe we should be doing that, like parking. Maybe we should be doing that for everything. Maybe we don't need 5 daycares in a particular neighborhood. So
that's what I was thinking as you were speaking, is that it's more general to at least non-residential uses in residential districts.
Yes.
Because those are out of character of the rest of the neighborhood. So having a concentration becomes a problematic thing.
Well, to the point of the people speaking yesterday, you know, it does change the character of the neighborhood. 1 might not, 5 might not, but 10 might, you know, depending on what.
And 10 daycares would change the character of the neighborhood too. So it's the same.
Different in a retail zoned area.
Right.
Correct.
Residentially zoned areas.
Right. Okay. So I'll leave that. So that'll be third on the list of things to look at. So thank you.
Since I have the mic, I was going to go over to Cindy in a second, but since this it can sort of fall under old business, sure. There had been somebody who had reached out in 2023 about the Ascent. And I don't think it was you, but it was probably one of your neighbors. And we had followed up with the developer at the time, but there was never any follow through. So I want to apologize because I think that was a dropping of the ball on our end. But the initial conversation was, hey, can you change out those lights? Because I drove down the street. I think I had some of the other staff do it too. And it was obvious. So it's not that there couldn't be any lights up there. It's just the wattage and the shielding was strong. Yeah. So we'll pick that back up and get back to you.
Well, you
I think you can
bypass it. You're done. They'll take care of it. And I think, and you know, we should have shared this before when more people were here, but the staff actually goes out to these sites when we get calls. I mean, we've had pictures, and we've had, you know, the staff lets us know what they find. I mean, we're going to be assessing, spoiler alert, we're going to be assessing automotive uses because that's been a problem. And many of us have said something about it to ones that are near our houses, but also staff has been visiting them and taking into account whether or not they're following their parking plans and their conditional use permits. So these are not they let you out sometimes, right? And get to go visit this parts of the city. Okay, so that's old business. New business. Can I invite you to come on up? And Lee, you were not sworn in?
Correct. Sorry, I was late.
No, it's fine. Lee, go ahead.
This doesn't pertain to any matter. Do you need it to be sworn in? It's just.
I don't know. No, I guess not. Okay, you're off for another few minutes. Okay, go ahead. We just need your name and address though for the minutes.
I'm Philip Wadsworth. Cindy and I live on Delaware Drive. I'm here, same as Lou, about the green space. So to try and bring it to the commission, we've been to a presentation where we believe that there's been discussion on setback changes and also use changes, in the sense it's been presented to us as being 2 lots that's going to 3 lots for a condo development. So I understand you haven't seen it. I'm surprised you haven't seen it.
Well, they would have to, I mean, I guess, so if there's a lot adjoinment or re-subdivision, which is basically if you want to take apart lots or put them back together, the terminology is terrible, but that will have to come to us, and that does have to that goes to staff first.
Yep.
They will let us know if it gets through, meaning if staff agrees that it is a possible use that could be brought to the Planning Commission for approval, they will then put it on our agenda and we can either approve it or disapprove it. But I guess, you know, are we up to that yet? No. So maybe are you able to give like a little bit of an update of what has come to planning and what hasn't?
Well, right now it's something that's before council for the consideration of the purchase agreement, which is really the first step before any of the design review.
Because the city owns the lot. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. When the city owns the lot, the purchase agreement has to come first because the developer can't do anything until they own it. With other things.
And survey it Am I allowed to just go onto city property and start digging holes?
Okay, well, I don't know, although Mayor's Action Center, but maybe the law department, they're doing a lot of stuff now. I don't know if the law department is available, but right. But I guess I would say, just to be clear, when there are developers that own property, we can see those developments and they can come to us for subdivisions, lot adjournments, things like that without a developer agreement, because they own the property. When the city owns the property, the agreement has to come first. So it is a council and administration issue at this point, since the city has not yet turned over the property. So it actually couldn't come to us unless the city was developing it, in which case, yeah.
You're correct. There would need to be some purchase agreement or agreement by city council about what may occur on that site. Often they can then start the review processes while council on a different track will talk about a development agreement should one need to be created.
Right.
And just to add, so on the Noble project that you spoke about, that was a two-step purchase agreement, and then there was a development agreement at the end. And so there was a preliminary presentation that was made before you in between.
Yes.
Before the final development agreement was signed, because that was already something that had been passed through council.
I assume that no one can dig holes in a city property without the city's permission.
Who would give that permission, sir?
Who gives the authorization?
Well, Christy, not for the minutes, but I think there's a lot of questions about who gives authorization in the city right now. And I think we are the least able to answer that at this point. So,
Madam Commissioner. So I recognize we're at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
You've been going strong, very engaged. So maybe I'm a little premature, but I'll say a couple of points. We as neighbors are trying to catch up. It does appear to us that there is a lot of work being done because they've agreed on they appear to have agreed on a price that's been presented to the council. So there is a lot of work being done. We as residents have other ideas how to use the space. It lines in well with what we believe the charter is, which is maintaining it as a green space, maybe as a sculpture garden, maybe as a park, maybe as a mini forest. There are lots of alternatives. So if it comes to you and we've not been engaged, we'll be very disappointed. So as an action item to whoever it would be appropriate, I request that the movement forward that the developers had for 9 months be paused to engage with the community.
well, again, I apologize that we can't make that happen. What we can do is that if it were to come to us for any conditional use permit, there is a notification requirement that neighbors within a certain radius of the site must be notified of a public hearing. So that does happen here. That doesn't necessarily happen with council matters where you might have to go on the website and look at the agenda and things like that. You will if you're within a certain radius, and I can't remember what that radius is right now.
We're going to be within that radius.
Yeah, I mean, the neighboring properties will assuredly get it, and then I'm sure you will spread the word. But that would be even a lot adjournment or subdivision would be noticed that way to you. So if it got to the point where they own the property and said, oh, we want to put those lots together, you would be notified that that would happen at the Planning Commission on X date at 7 p.m., presuming.
The issue of the purchase of city property, that's something that would come before the city government, not the city planning commission. That would be a matter for city council, mayor's office. That's a decision. Does the city want to sell a piece of property? That's not a decision the planning commission will ever be asked to make.
That I understand, but it's as a planning commission with changing in setbacks and changing in zoning.
That would come. Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
I did just want to add that the public should pay attention to, in all of our purchase agreements, and those that are just that or that with a development agreement, they're all contingent or conditioned upon the design review occurring. So the purchase agreement may go through and then they come to the planning commission. The planning commission says, we're not going to consolidate the lots. We're not going to approve the conditional use. And the project is essentially.
And that's what happened with Noble Station, is that they did have a purchase agreement and we said, we're not allowing this to go through unless you fix it. And
as you bring up the purchase agreement, we can't even find where it was ever offered for sale. Right?
That's.
Understand.
Yeah.
And it may be that a potential buyer just goes to the city and says, we're interested in buying this, as opposed to the city saying, we're offering this piece of property for sale.
That's true. That's
We are, we are all learning so much about this process for a process that is not documented very well for us to learn from.
Right.
So thank you.
Yes, but not this type of, you don't want me lawyering this.
FOIA requests with the different commissions, and we're just trying to catch up. I've gotten no response. I've got no follow-up that they received them, and I've received no documentation that anything else has been filed. So I'm assuming that nothing else has happened except those PDFs that were filed previously. And I'm hoping I don't find out there's stuff out there that.
Right. So that goes through the law department. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
Over what period of time were those filed?
10 days ago.
Well, the law department's been fielding a lot of public records requests lately, so yeah.
How much we've learned in 3 weeks.
No.
I mean, I've been involved in courthouse stuff, but not city operations. And we've learned an awful lot in 3 weeks. I'll tell you.
I just wanted to say, if I could, the 3 council persons who are on the Planning and Development Committee, because it sounds like you want engagement sooner than it comes to the Planning Commission, are Council President Kuda, Vice President Russell, and Craig Cobb.
But again, they only, council committee meetings meet when the chair makes a meeting. So you could request one, but they or reach out to Planning and Development Committee meeting of the council. I mean, it doesn't mean they have to have a meeting, but you could ask for that. But they set their own schedules. This, back to my prior point, we desperately need some sort of, we've done a lot of community engagement on projects that come to us, but I think that this must be 5 or 6 or more years that we have seen that the development process here is really not just opaque, but we've never educated the public on what the commissions do, who sits on them, how we consider things, what the route is amongst, it goes to us, BZA, ABR. We have just a bunch of acronyms. And I just would love to, we've done training for ourselves, but maybe we need to consider what type of, and now might not be the best time, but at some point we may want to consider that type of community outreach to provide some context and information on how this part of work. Well, we'll ask you to spread the word once we set something up. But I think, we welcome, like I said, we welcome people coming to our meetings because nobody really does.
Everybody I've met has been great.
Yeah.
But nobody seems to know what the other person's doing.
Well, we do have staff that, and in fact, point of information, Eric and team, Director Zampton and team oversee planning, Board of Zoning Appeals, and Architectural Board of Review. So all of that is consolidated under Director Zamp's department. And that's how, really the staffing of this is how we make sure that everything flows through our processes. Do you want to share something?
I did want to add that there is an intention to have an updated planning website. And what we wanted to do is have a lot of the process stuff baked in, maybe some little videos of, hey, this is the Planning Commission. Maybe we even film a little Planning Commission. Because when I first started here in 2021 and I was going around talking to people, the average person has no idea who does what. They know council and that's about it. And actually a lot of the good work really happens here. So I think those of you who are getting educated on this, the more you can educate others is great, and have them reach out and just, we're willing to walk people through what the process is. Sometimes it is actually, sorry, you got to talk to the mayor or council. They are Eric Zanft, Director Zanft. Oh, my thing's not on.
The one time you really need your nameplate, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got back into the office, but I did see it. Yes, on Tuesday I saw it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Ken, did you want to say something?
I'll just say this is particular. You probably don't recognize me because I'm not walking my dogs, but like I know you live behind Amy. I live on South Overlook too, so this parcel is of interest to me too. So, like I said, anything that comes through us, know that you have a neighbor that's engaged in this.
Yeah, we've got a petition going, but we're struggling to get the dogs to sign it.
Yeah. Maybe don't bring them here because I'm allergic, but bring them to council. That's fine. Yeah, Jessica, do you have?
On the same train of conversation, the community coordination piece, we've seen it with these larger developments that they may be doing it, but the information isn't shared back necessarily. So it's hard to gather exactly what feedback and goals were developed out of that as we're reviewing. So hopefully that's something we can.
Yeah, and we've asked, I think we've done in the past, we've asked for planning department staff to provide us with summaries, or we've asked the applicant to report on it when they, come in, so we can continue to figure out how to get that feedback to us.
On that process side, the applicant's the developer.
Yes.
He or she is going to want it to go forward.
Sure.
That
doesn't mean it doesn't mean it has to. Noble Station,
okay.
I am from New York originally. That was a very, we told him to figure it out.
Madam Chair, if I could, on the Nobility Court.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Nobility Court. That sounds.
That's in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we were where you are. Was that a year ago or
no more?
2 years ago.
2 or 3.
And it was a bitter pill to find out that city-owned property was already committed to a developer that hadn't done virtually no outreach. And when it came to planning was when the neighbors really found out about it. And the planning department, I would say this about them if they weren't sitting at the table there, they did a great job of, one, embracing the concerns of the neighbors who had not had any outreach, except maybe 5, because the list that the developer was working on was obsolete and included a lot of duplicates. So when they said, we've done, and I would say this to the developers at the time, we've done all this outreach, it turned out to be an inflated number, not an actual number of people who were contacted. They created a scrub list. They worked with the developer, they worked with the neighbors, and it wound up, as our chairwoman said, it wound up being stopped when they had a low-income housing tax credit application deadline. They wound up missing that deadline. So the process can work when the employees know about it. This is planning, so it's later in the flow than you want to be engaged. But if you get plugged in to, I would say, we know about it, but we're a little farther away, but the council people and the mayor's office and for whatever is going on, that's still our structure right now, in all candor. And but the action, but I would say at least the council president and the council folks and make your presence known and your concerns, because that's what changed Noble Station into Nobility Court. And people who were very much opposed to it, for some of the same reasons you said, felt heard. I mean, it's still happening and a lot of people aren't happy about it, but at least there was conversation and there were adjustments made.
What infuriated us was that the council meeting.
Madam Chair, if we're still in session, he needs to go to the microphone so that it can be recorded.
Okay, well, we could talk about this. We have 2 more quick things I wanted to cover. So, okay, so just one. Thank you for the reminder. Thank you so much. Commissioner Horowitz has informed me. Do you want to?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah, go ahead. So. No, he's fine, but we had a former Cleveland Heights Planning Commission member who passed away recently. So Commissioner Horowitz just wants to say.
I'm probably the only person to whom this name will sound familiar, but Jack Boyle is, Yes. He is 85, passed away a few days ago. I was at the viewing this afternoon. Interment will be tomorrow. But he was the youngest person elected to city council back in the late 70s and the first Democrat. And
That's funny.
and he served in the 70s and 80s for 10 out of 12 years. There was 2 years missing in there. And I still remember that a plaque was made up for him, and it somehow had the wording that Jack Boyle, having served honorably for 10 of the last 12 years. I still remember this, which he thought was funny as hell, by the way. But when he retired from that, he ended up on Planning Commission also for a while, in addition to being a VP of Cleveland State University and having an insurance business. And his wife was a county commissioner. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they did a lot of stuff. Was involved in the lawsuit against racial steering that was filed in federal court. Very active guy, dry sense of humor. And the thing I remember the most is that when we worked together on city council, which by the time I got elected a few years later was, I think, 2 Republicans, 5 Democrats, we would talk about things. We would noodle them, we would argue about them in committee of the whole, and then we would negotiate. We would get legislation that everybody could agree to. It was very rare, actually, that we didn't end up 7-0 because we thought it through and government worked. And I won't comment, short comment about now that you would think everybody's on the same page, we seem to have a circular firing squad. But be that as it may, I just wanted to remember Jack Boyle publicly for the man he was and the way he and his family served this community.
Thank you. And last note for me, I just want to express my thanks to the commission for the memo that was sent a couple weeks ago. It's been an interesting and tough time, and I wanted to say how much that your support and your confidence in me meant to me and continues to mean to me. And it's an incredible honor to serve with you. And I wanted to thank you for that very heartfelt and very public expression of support. So thank you. And with that, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you.